So the first one up is Yvonne. So Yvonne joins us on the Write the Doc stage. Welcome. Now, Yvonne's currently working for ANZ Bank as a tech writer at the moment, and but also has worked in a number of different fields, such as magazine editor, historian, book reviewer, and even blogger. So lots of different things. So drawing on research from the adult education sector and other sources, Yvonne will explore how we can adopt a growth mindset view of ourselves and our co-workers, instead of seeing people as having deficits in abilities. Then we'll learn what practical steps can be implemented in the workplace to help everyone feel that they can succeed at writers. Folks, please welcome Yvonne Perkins.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you very much for a very informative talk, Janet. Can't see where you're sitting, but that was great. So now we are going to move from Janet's world of user-facing documentation, so external user-facing documentation, into the world of engineer-written documentation for internal purposes. And the role of the technical writer, as I'm sure all of you are aware, is quite different in that area. It's more of an enabling the engineer through resources, through coaching, providing writing tools, encouragement, and identifying, gaps and all of that kind of thing, rather than actually, so I don't do much actual writing myself. Okay, so to get started, I will click the right button. I want you to meet Peter. Peter is a junior engineer. And he's pretty intent on his screen at all times. As a child, Peter enjoyed making robots. At school, he did well at maths and science, but he really struggled at those high school English essays, understanding and writing about the literary techniques of 19th century poets. And he always got a bad report for his English, and you need to do better, and you're struggling, and all of that. And 6 years of all of that, he's going, I'm going to university, great, I'll do my computer science degree. And oh no, I've got assignments to write. And he was always marked up for his beautiful coding work and all of that, marked down for his writing. And he knew he was a bad writer. Peter was very excited about his first software development job. Enthusiasm, left uni behind, left all that horrible writing experience behind. He's going to code. Well, we've all been in jobs like that, haven't we? Oh dear. So when he started work, his boss wasn't exactly enthusiastic about yet another junior coder starting. His team wasn't very enthusiastic about another junior coder starting, and they were all focused on doing the support tickets. Finish this ticket, stand up, why are you so slow on this ticket? Come on, we've got to get faster, we've got a big backlog of support tickets, get faster. And then his performance review with his manager, and his manager says, documentation is part of done. Why aren't you doing documentation? He didn't know. Oh dear, he didn't know. And with trepidation, he did a couple of lines. And then the next performance review, the manager said, because he did metrics, this manager, and he used his metrics really well. And he had a list of how many lines of markdown did each engineer update over the period. And Peter was down the bottom. So, he quit. And he went backpacking and enjoyed himself. But the problem is, I'm not managing my slides properly. He actually ran out of money and he had to start it again. But he was filled with fear of writing and fear of any kind, and I think probably a lot of us are very familiar with, we've got fears in any element of our lives, it really stops you from succeeding. It stops you from thinking, and you're a deer in spotlights like I am right now. So today I want to talk about psychological safety. And frankly, when I did this proposal for this talk, this is not the talk I was expecting to give. But I consulted with a number of TAFE teachers. They got me started, and there's a similarity. They're working with people, adult learners, who have gone through an education system that has scarred them. And so they come across this kind of phenomenon quite often. They're struggling writers, people struggling with maths, but on top of that, they've got this fear because of all of these negative experiences that they have. And it's a fear that is really, really a big block for them. I'll then talk about the role that a team plays. Now, if we think about Peter's first job, he didn't have a welcoming manager. His welcoming manager didn't use metrics against people rather than to be encouraging, and it was just a production line of support tickets, and we've got this big backlog, and the stress levels are actually quite high. And then I'll finish up talking about how our perception of people matters. So, yeah, as I said, this is not the talk that I was going to give at all. So I'll start off with exploring this concept of psychological safety. And I think we can all recognise just by the name psychological safety, and that first workplace was not a psychological safe environment, was it? So it had a culture of criticism, and there was a culture of blame as well. So something went wrong, an engineer made a mistake and it caused a P2 issue, and why did you make a mistake, and that kind of thing, which kind of stopped people from reporting errors, which just actually compounded the errors. And as we all know, if you get an error early, fess up early, then you can deal with it. So rather than being a P4, it escalates to a P2 and then a P1. People have a fear of failure, and I think we've all probably got a little element of that. And that fear of failure is that, and you try and hide your failures. And I think we all do that to some degree. And also bringing past negative experiences to the workplace. So you might have the most perfect workplace, but you have a newcomer coming in and they've had very bad previous experiences. So psychologically safe workplace, people feel comfortable sharing their concerns and mistakes without fear of embarrassment, shame, retribution. They are confident that they can speak up and talk to their colleagues without feeling humiliated. So they can go onto this team Slack channel and just ask their question without the manager saying, what do you need to know that for? And no, that's the wrong thing to do. They have trust and respect for their colleagues. They know that their colleagues have got their back. And if they have got a trouble, they can go directly to one of their colleagues and they will have a listening ear. I've actually divided it up into two sections. I've got the feel, and the feel thing is incredibly important, the emotions of how you feel. There's also, in a psychological place, what do people do? People ask questions when they are unsure, report mistakes quickly, promptly. They coordinate amongst other teams rather than living as an island. And they share ideas for innovation. Now, these might be very poorly formed ideas, but they still share even poorly formed ideas because they're not worried about people going, oh, that's a ridiculous idea. In a psychologically safe workplace, people will sit back and they will listen and they will think and they go, what about? Yeah, and they will kind of expand, share the idea around the group. And I'm not saying a psychological safe environment is one where you just say you're all very agreeable and you don't have disagreements, but the disagreements are about the idea and not about the person. They're not, and people don't feel that it's a personal attack on the person. Now, I've put here the reference that I got for all of this. Amy Edmondson is a Harvard professor, written a book called The Fearless Organisation, and she established this phrase, the psychologically safe environments. But it is widely, and she herself admits that it is, she's drawing on the, she's building on the shoulders of giants. And there is a lot of research, psychological research, even if it doesn't name psychologically safe, that environment, it actually covers, that. So the characteristics of a psychologically safe environment. Truthful. We haven't got people hiding their errors, and we've got people actually pointing out that there is an error. So the two sides of the equation. And they can be truthful because there's respect amongst their colleagues. They are sharing. There's trust. They care about each other as people, not just as doers of technology. And the last one I've put there is humility. And humility is not the same as lack of confidence, but it's quite often interpreted as lack of confidence, which is really unfortunate in today's workplace. But humility is understanding that everybody has actually got skills and experiences that are valuable, and I need to listen and I need to learn from others. And so that's even amongst the managers when they're talking with their team. A manager practicing psychological safety will be actively listening and will be in a learning mode and learning from their subordinates. Now I'm sure that you could now name a whole lot of behavioural characteristics that contribute to the psychologically safe environment. I've just picked out a few. And one of the things I've noticed with the popular management books is everybody has got their list, and it's a variation, and I don't think any... but it's basically about behaviours in the workplace. And when I'm saying practical steps that we can take, it is how we behave towards our colleagues and in the workplace. Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, he's identified for a well-functioning team, you will trust one another. You will engage in unfiltered conflict around ideas. It's around ideas, not people. You commit to decisions and plans of action. So you don't have a plan of action and then somebody goes, yeah, but I don't think that's a really good idea, so goes and does their own thing. That's not a well-functioning team. You also hold yourself accountable, and you hold one another accountable for the decisions that the team makes. So you work as a team. So when we're talking about a psychologically safe workplace and we're talking about teamwork, we're not talking about fluffy, we're being nice to each other. There's real accountability in a psychologically safe team. But we're focusing on collective results. So if you think back to Peter's manager, he was actually focusing on individual results. How many lines of markdown did each individual engineer contribute? Now, in Peter's case, he was actually doing a lot of documentation that wasn't registered in GitHub, because he was writing the basic notes that when he was working with a team of people, he was writing all the basic notes and journaling what the team was doing. And then he handed those notes over to another team member who was happy to do the writing up. This question of authorship is actually really important. And when we're thinking about metrics, is it actually captured in GitHub, in the GitHub commits? He was doing it quietly on the side. So, names just escaped me, but the fearless organisation is one in which interpersonal fear is minimised. That's what we're talking about with psychological safety. So we're talking about how a team operates, but in a psychologically, I'll just wait for the slide to get up, but in a psychologically safe environment, we're not talking about the absence of fear, the absence of anxiety, because we've got the future. None of us can control the future. So we're talking about dealing with the interpersonal fear amongst team members. Okay, so what is the role of leaders in the workplace in this psychologically safe work environment that promotes learning? The role of leaders is to set the stage and to reframe. So basically the workplace leader, they communicate to the team what the organisation's general goals are so that the team is very, very clear. What is the roadmap? What is our purpose? And continually talks about that. So it's not just a one-off. The leader needs to do constant work. They reframe errors. What is an error? It's actually an opportunity to learn. But there are some errors that, no, if we go against established procedure, it's not about ticking that. But it's what are we going to be learning from it? And if you have, so it's still enforcing standards. The team leader will move away from the culture of blame and will reset the roles of the leader and the team members. So the leader is not the boss, the leader communicates the organisation's goals, but resetting, we've got this perception of what a leader, what a boss is, that is very top-down, almost like an army thing, and a leader needs to constantly reframe that as I am the person that gets rid of blockages. I am here to help you. That is my purpose. And the team members' role is not to passively sit and wait to hear what the boss tells them to do and only do it when they do that. Is to be proactive in their work, to share their experience. Invite participation through active listening and very searching questions that are not just yes and no. So instead of cutting people off short when you ask a question, sit back, pause and listen and wait for a person to give a full answer so the person feels heard. And respond productively, express appreciation, destigmatise failure, but also sanction clear violations. There are certain rules that are well established that teams agreed to, and somebody violates those rules, there needs to be clear sanctions. Because that's not a psychologically safe environment if there's not, if anything goes, because then that's unfair to the rest of the team members. And justice is part of psychological safety. So Peter ran out of money and gets a new job. And he's moved into a new organisation where they've actually got a pretty good working environment. So his teammate Andrew talks about his hobby of making remote controlled cars, and that kind of incidental, like what did you get up to on the weekend? How's your dog going? You had an operation at the vet. That is the base step for establishing psychological safety. It shows that you are caring about the other person, and it's establishing those conversational norms that need to. Of sharing, listening, taking turns, that are part of what's required for decision-making and discussion of team issues. But Peter is still rather wary. He's got a great boss. The team is rated highly by the HR department for their psychological safety. But Peter is pretty wary. He's been through a honeymoon phase before. So he's very careful about what he says. And the boss doesn't understand what is the problem. We've got a great team. Why isn't he speaking up? Why isn't he asking questions? But the team members continue to engage him just in general conversation. So Dimitri asks him about his travels and listens, because Peter has been away for 12 months or something. He got up to quite a lot in Asia, and Dimitri is very interested. Technical writer, Madhu, expresses appreciation for just a few words that Peter put in to correct a markdown doc. It was out of date. It was a critical piece of advice, and it was just 3 words, and it changed everything. Madhu was very grateful. So she was not looking at the metric of how many lines, but what are the value that he updated, but what is the value of what you put in. So one thing that Peter's new boss didn't realise is that it actually takes a psychologically safe environment. It requires a lot of work to keep maintaining it. And when somebody new comes in, they come with all their previous experiences, and there will be some positive experiences and negative experiences. And I think we've all been in workplaces where we've started in the workplace, and I certainly remember an accounting firm that I started in many years ago, and it was fabulous. 2.5 years, we had a great team, we knew each other, we celebrated each other's birthdays, and then something went off, and it just went downhill. And we just got stressed, and more stressed, but the vibe wasn't there. The friendship that we had developed, new people had come in, and what had happened was that the partners in that accounting firm had got distracted. And they'd got distracted, it had grown, and they were actually concentrating on getting a lot of new clients in, new employees in, and the partners had not been doing that work on continuing to maintain that psychologically safe environment and that good team working environment. So it needs constant work. You can't just set it and leave it. Okay, I couldn't come up with a better word. I was pretty tired when I was writing this talk. So what is the role of not team leaders? So probably that covers quite a bit of us. Actually, the people who are not the team leaders have actually, as we have seen in those slides, have got a lot of work to do and a lot to contribute. They're one of the things when I was reading a whole lot of management books, it was all about what should the leaders do to create a good teamwork and psychologically, and it was all on the leaders. And I just felt it was a little bit off. And then at the end of Amy Edmondson's book, she actually addressed that what is the role of every person in the team. And so leading from the back of the room, and I think talking with a number of documentarians here, leading from the back of the room. So us as technical writers quite often are, not in a position of influence in our team, but we can have those quiet one-on-ones, with people. And so like what Madhu did with Peter, she did not, and all of her working with Peter, she did not advertise that to the rest of the team. She was just doing it quietly on the side and influencing. She was, and all the team members were actively listening. And the last one, giving feedback to the colleagues, and that feedback, positive feedback sandwich idea, positive, reinforcement that perhaps could improve, and why don't you try this? But then that third, and going back to that positive thing, it's a very important technique. And importantly, seeing potential in others, seeing people not from the point of their deficits. And I think quite often it's very easy for us to slip into, this engineer is actually particularly bad at writing and needs special help. But quite often, actually, it's a whole lot of them. And one of the, sometimes people feel that they're really good writers and and that, well, they've got a pretty big problem with great big long sentences, great big long essays in their documentation, which is just as, frankly, could even be worse than the missing definite articles. I mean, like, at least you can understand that, but like a great big wordy document is very, very hard to understand. So the importance of providing that assistance, providing the tools and the resources and that one-on-one coaching all the time for the entire team, not just the people identified as strugglers. And I've talked about team leaders, I've talked about the members of the team, but it's also about I, so the individual, us, our responsibility. And saying phrases like, I'm sorry, I don't know, I need help, it's really good to do that in a team environment, because those people that might have had a very negative experience before can see that, oh, that person can ask for help, and then they observe the interaction with the other members of the team, and they say, oh, that wasn't too bad, actually, and then they gradually warm up. And this is a concept of speak as if you are already in a psychologically safe environment. So the person who's fearful themselves also has responsibilities to contribute as much as they can. So we're not talking about going, being like everybody else, but just little by little, and perhaps setting their own personal goals that they keep to themselves of, I'll just try this little bit and I will say something nice about another team member in our stand-up, and just gradually building it up from there. So seeing the potential in you. Quite often when I'm talking to engineers, and I talk about also authors of books and how their first draft is always bad. And quite often people who are not professional writers don't actually realise that this wonderful book, this wonderful article that is so eloquent, actually went through 10 revisions. And then it went to the editor, and then there were some more revisions, and they don't realise the amount of work. All we're asking our engineers to do is the first draft. We are not expecting perfection. That is a role of the technical writer, if there is one, to do the uplift, to do the editing and to do the moulding. But we need the engineer to provide that base material, the accurate material, the complete material, and understandable, so then we can work with it. Okay, so I haven't kept track of the time. How are we going? Yep. Okay, so recap. So I often think 20th century was about competition, the rise of competition, and that was, through free market economics all throughout the world. But 21st century is about collaboration, and we are still learning to do that. And all of us have got a mindset, just because of the general environment we're in, of a competitive mindset and looking after number one and not the others. And this is something we all need to relearn, and to just be have it front of mind, how am I participating as a team member? How am I contributing to the well-being of the team? So it's the team and every member of the team who create a positive learning environment at work. Google's Project Aristotle actually identified a well-functioning team. The number one thing, the number one element is not the personality types, it's not the skill sets. The number one characteristic of a well-functioning team is psychological safe work environment. And, yeah. So see people for their potential, not their deficits. Okay, so I'd just like to give a few acknowledgements. You were saved a horrible academic lecture. I realise my public speaking experience is actually mainly in academic research circles, and so I was going to give you my theoretical framework, my original insights. I was going to link in with the discourse of, and then my daughter, Alexandra, who's a product manager, she looked at it and she went, "Mum." And it's thanks to her that you've got Peter, instead of like this turgid, like stuff-filled lecture. But also, like, work experiences, and I think everybody here, can draw on a lot of work experiences over the years, the colleagues. A couple of TAFE adult educators I consulted with, and they got me started on that psychologically safe work environment, and it's an example of we can draw so much from different disciplines than our own. The references, just in case you want, there's a couple of books there, a couple of articles there. That's a spelling of Patrick Lencioni. I'll just leave it up there in case you want to think. And I'm going to end with, of course, the contributions of documentarians. And we had some wonderful talks yesterday, and obviously there's so much you could say, and I knew I could see on the program, there was no need for me to talk about diversity and inclusion. Of course, that's a massive part of providing a psychologically safe work environment. So thank you, Rhiannon Hall, for covering that. Yay! And I've actually got also, I went through a few of the Write the Docs videos as well, so I've got other things listed there. Shumin Chen from yesterday, Simplified Technical English, absolutely. Why choose a really complicated, not very frequently used word when you can use a really simple word and a simple sentence construction, and then it makes it more inclusive for everybody. And I thought Sarah Rainsberger's talk last year, at the conference last year, was a really good example in action of teamwork. And what she was doing, I thought, if people, I don't know if there's a video online, I couldn't find one, but if you can go back to her talk, that is in action what I'm talking about here. So thank you very much, and all done.
Folks, do you have any questions for Yvonne? So the question was about tools that might help writers that aren't really accustomed to writing get into it more. Do you have any resources that you sort of recommend people use to sort of get started there?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rhiannon. I have actually found with people who are not writers, quite often are not really reading more stuff. And look, the engineers, they're reading so many documents, and providing another document is just not what they need. So I have gone down that path of trying to produce the written ones. Brown bag sessions are much more relaxing. So you've got, so we are in a hybrid working environment, and so, do it on Teams. That's a voluntary thing. You turn up if you want to. That is an effective means. Showcases as well. But in terms of getting started, what I do is actually meet with any new starter in the team. And I established that personal connection, and just ask me. But just also in that first scenario, Peter's boss didn't actually explain the expectations about documentation when he got started. And I don't leave that to chance. And so I explain what the expectations are, but you come directly to me for assistance. And that coming directly, not I expect you to drop a question in the team Slack channel so that everybody can see that you're struggling, but coming directly to me is better. It is a very iterative work. It can take months to get an engineer who's really struggling at the beginning to get started, to get confidence, but also a resource that we're finding valuable is templates. There's nothing worse than starting with a blank page. Even professional writers, the blank page is really difficult, but a template has actually got the structure. And so instead of complaining about you guys just doing the essay, It's no use complaining. Give them the resources and the templates with comments on how to fill it in, I think is a very effective one too.
Yeah, templates for the win. Hey, they're really, really useful. It's that we were talking. Your talk really captures psychological safety for others, but what about psychological safety for you as an individual when you're going into a new workplace? Are there strategies that we can use to actually feel psychologically safe when perhaps there isn't a lot of that floating around in a new workspace?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I think a lot of us have had some pretty negative experiences, and as I said, you do bring that in, that fear, and it's back in your subconscious. You don't know you're doing it. And I'm not an expert, and that's what I should have emphasised in my talk. I'm not the expert, and I would imagine in this room there would be a lot of really useful suggestions that I would learn from. The short term, what I try to do is do the how was your weekend? I was really surprised. I thought that was just a natural question. I actually introduced that into a team. And I mean, just that simple question. And that is that connection. And I can do it generally do it one-on-one. You don't do it in stand-up, but do it one-on-one. And that is showing that I care about you, learning about their backstory, where they've worked. It's not going to solve everything, because when I was talking about like a regular employment environment, not a contracting environment, I think that's much more difficult. So I'd be interested in actually your thoughts about it, maybe next year, about that contracting environment, because it's a short term, as you pointed out, and these strategies do take a while to work out, yeah. But that acting as if you are in a psychologically safe, so giving people the benefit of the doubt, showing that you trust them, yeah, maybe that's worth a go.
Yeah, good advice. Well, unfortunately, we are actually out of time for the Q&A session for this. Please, folks, once again, thank you.